Hey class, so for today's exercise I'm going to be showing you how to take your model from Maya and export it into Substance Stager. So for this exercise I'm just going to select my whole model minus the ground and not include the lights either, and just go to File and Export Selection. I'm going to export into my scenes, and I'm just going to call this All Together, because it is going to include all of my different materials, from my grass to my tree trunk. All right, now I'm going to open up Substance Stager. So this is a new program that we haven't used before, and its purpose is to just render the images and the materials that we've created. You can still model in Substance Stager, and you can still add materials and lights. So it's kind of an interesting little program. So I'm going to go to Create New, and it's just going to open up a general scene. You can see in Substance Stager that I have all of kind of the regular menus. So File, where I can import, we can edit, we can add cameras. So we can take specific cameras for different shots and create those, and then just kind of window where you can hide and show all of these different menu options. So I'm going to start by just going to File and importing my 3D model and grab that all together. And notice that since I've been using project folders, it's just in my scenes folder. For options, you can include unused materials. That's fine if your file is not huge. If it is huge, you might want to turn this off. And then I didn't ever make UVs for my tree trunk, so I'm just going to include that to generate UVs for that. All right, and you can see when it comes in, it is generating all of my tree grass and my tree material. Now you'll notice that because of Maya's weirdness about the opacity map, it is showing the opposite of what we want shown for our grass and our leaves. So that'll be the first thing I fix. Let me just go through really quickly a couple things about Substance Stager before we fix that. But basically, this is your select. All of your tools are on the left-hand side here. You've got your select, your align, selecting different parts of your model. You can sample different materials and colors and actually kind of like apply them to objects. You can draw custom shapes. You can add environment lighting, so that's our HDRI lighting. And you can also rotate it. And then here's move, scale, and rotate. So dolly is zooming in, pan is moving up and down, left and right, and then orbiting is rotating around our object. We have some starter assets that we can add to our scene, so I'm actually going to do that really quickly here. Just add a cylinder for our model, and this will be just a little base for us to stand on. On the right hand side here is our scene menu, so this is kind of like our outliner. And then actions, so to translate, duplicate, mirror, etc. And then finally we have our properties. So here is where we can add our radius. So I'm just going to do a radius of like 20. My height is going to be just like 0.1. And then sides, I'm not sure what that means. Okay, you can also bevel. So if you want to have like a nice sharp corner, you can do that. And you can turn on collision if you have that in here. You can also add materials. Right now it has a default material, but I will change that as well. So if we look through a little bit of our starter assets on the left, you can see that first menu is basic shapes. It comes with a bunch of different standard models that you can just get started with texturing. So there's like cans, juice boxes, there's backpacks, all the kinds of things that if you wanted to just start making a scene, you can. There's materials next. And these basic materials have this default has a little bit of specularity. So remember, that's the shininess here. Glass, matte, subsurface. And then we have a bunch of standard materials. And these are all adjustable to lesser or greater extents. Okay. So for this, I'm actually going to just place how about just a standard map material on this base. And then I can come to the right here in my properties menu, and I'm just going to change the color so that it has a little bit more green, and I can adjust this later. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so now let's get to fixing these leaves. So if I select my leaf on the right hand side, you'll see I've got my transform menu, my object menu, and my material menu. And I used a Lambert on here, and I can change the material here with my base color. So we've already applied that. I can add a roughness map by just clicking this little plus sign and selecting where that roughness map was. So I'm going to go to my assets folder, or I think I put it in source images, final, and let's grab my roughness. So these maps are just like what we've been working on in Substance Painter and in Maya. Now, a little bit lower here is my opacity map, and remember that I use that inverted opacity map. So right now, where everything is white is showing, and where everything is black is not. So let's select a different file, and rather than the substance opacity, I'm going to use my original My Branches opacity map and hit open. All right, instantly this has been fixed. So that's fantastic. I also have an ambient occlusion map. Remember, that's the light and shadow map. So let's go add that in as well. There we go. And we can also add in normal maps. So I think my normal map is here. You can also do things like add the scale on your normals. I think this will make your displacement greater or less. And then finally, if you have like a height map, you can add that too. Or emission, so that's if you want a glowing light, etc. Now the edges of this are, I believe, the specular edge colors, so we can try and work on this to be a little less bright. Right now I think that's causing this super bright white light, so I'm just going to take that down a little bit to a softer pink. Okay, next one, let's do exactly the same for the grass that I created. So I'm just going to select that, scroll down, and change my opacity map. That's the number 1. Okay, so just have to find that opacity mask and apply it. Now this one doesn't 100% solve everything, but let's just take a look. Oh, that looks better from this angle. There we go. Okay, so I could also add a roughness map, ambient occlusion map, and all of that to my model. But let's just see what this looks like. I'm going to make my base a little taller. There we go. Cool. All right, so that's our basic setup. We can also, in our left-hand side with our assets, there's an option for lights. So here you can add your area light, your spotlight, your point light, which is just a little point, and an overall directional light. We also have our environment images, similar to the HDRI lights. Ones to note are sun and 3-point lighting are really interesting. And then we also have those cool studio lights, studio horror lights, that kind of thing, as well as some outdoor ones. So there's some nice outdoor foresty ones as well. So I'm just going to go with the standard just to check it out, and then I can add my lighting later. So let's go to our render menu. So there's 2 tabs up at the top. Let's just select render. I'm going to render using ray tracing, so that's the nicer elements with all of the light bounces. Preset, I'm just going to do medium for right now, and there's also an option for max time. So I'm going to do 2 minutes. So that'll be 120 seconds. And again, like with Substance Painter, you'll probably want to up this to like 5 minutes. Denoise and displacement and resolution. So once you're set with that, you really do want to give it a file name now, because it's going to export immediately whatever you create. So let's call this tree demo render. And then I don't want to save it to my desktop. I'm going to save it to my organic tree model and the images folder here. So if you've been using your project folder, save it to your project images. And then our options are PNG or PSD. So PNG is the smallest of those 3 file types, so I'm just going to go with that. And then I'll see you back in 2 minutes. Perfect. Okay, so after 2 minutes, I have a fairly nice render. You can see that my leaves look so much better than they did in Maya. And my grass is looking pretty nice. What's nice about Substance Stager is if I did want to bring in tufts of grass on their own or rocks later on to my scene, I can absolutely do that, unlike with Substance Painter. So let's go back to design. And the one thing I do want to do is add a material to this tree trunk. I didn't do it in Maya, so now would be a great time to experiment with some of the materials. And now would actually be a great time to save, because while I do think this is a more stable program, I don't trust it all the way. So let's just call this Demo Stager. Okay, so as far as materials go, there are a standard set of materials in this library. And I will show you 2 options that are kind of interesting. One is the sandstone strata. So I'm just going to click and drag it to my tree. And you can notice that on the right hand side in my materials library, I can change the color of this tree bark. So I can, this is supposed to be tree or branches, or sorry, stone. But I can actually change the way that these 2 interact with each other. And since my initial bark was a little darker than this, I can, experiment with adjusting these. So that's nice. And that's because it's a procedural material. So this material is made kind of on the fly. So that's one option. The other option that I can use is the oak materials here. So there's an oak wood that I'm going to drop on, and you can see that that creates the tree rings. And again, I can adjust these colors as well to better match my material because it is procedural. So that's a real nice benefit of using the Substance Stager. One other thing I'd like to show you is the Substance Store. So there's many sites online where you can download an SBSAR asset. Unfortunately, a lot of these are paid assets which don't come with our subscription. However, there's an option for free, and you can check out these different cotton materials. There's also some like stylized dirty rocks, stylized island cliff. So you just click this little download button and it will show up in your downloads folder. And you can also add any of these kind of random 3D objects. Polyhaven also has some options that you can play with for downloads, and you can always export your models from Substance Designer as well as SBAR, and you can import those as well into Substance Stager. So it is a really cool resource. So let's just go look at what that is like. So I'm going to actually add a crystal here. And you can see our meat map material is here. So I'm just going to add some like texture to this little rock. Notice that the gizmo to transform things is all combined in Substance Stager. So the arrows are the move, the square is the scale, the lines is the rotate. So I'm just going to rotate this down, move it down to the ground, and I can scale it as well. Oops, that's move. There we go. Just rotate a tiny little bit and move it a tiny bit. There we go. Okay, so now that I've had that rock, what I can do is down on the bottom left, there's assets and project materials. So I'm going to click on that project materials and add a new material. Actually select a file, and this is where I can find my island cliff, or I also downloaded a rock. So that's an SBAR Substance Archive file. And from there, I can just click and drag it onto my little crystal rock here. And now I have a rock in my scene. It's not as nice as if you made it yourself going through the process. But if you want to add like a quick rock or something at the end here, this is how you would do it. All right, and so now I can just go back to my render. This time, if I want to have a nicer render, I'm going to crank up my max time. So I'm going to go to 4 minutes, so 240 seconds, and hit render. You do need to rename it to save multiple files. And I'll see you back in 4 minutes. All right, so my render is done. I think this looks a lot better. I adjusted the color on the tree branch as well as the color of the rock. I could further go into more of the HDRI lighting as well, but I think this is a nice step. If you check out where my first render was to this render, I think you'll agree that it looks a lot nicer. So definitely play around with Substance Stager. It's a lot of fun and there's lots of options. I really enjoyed playing with the color of the tree bark and the color of the rock. So I hope you enjoyed too. All right, thanks class.